It's fine today 大光です。今日津田沼に行ってハリー・ポッターと賢者の石の英語版とシャーロック・ホームズの原書を買いました。スティーブ・ジョブズの電気の原書を持ってるし、音読する材料には事足りませんね。なんでこんなん傾いてんだよ。そんなアクロバティックなポーズしてねえだろ。じゃあ続きからやっていきます。暑い今日ほんと暑い。The heart of nationalism is sometimes preferred strangers over friends and relatives. For example, a good patriot pays his taxes honestly, so that unknown children on the other side of the country will get good public health care, even if that means that he he cannot treat his own kids in an expensive private hospital. Similarly, a patriotic official gives lucrative jobs to the most qualified applicants rather than to his own brothers and cousins. This goes against millions of years of evolution. Tax evolution and nepotism come naturally to us, but nationalism says they are corrupt in order to make people renounce corruption and put national interests before family connections. Nations have to create a mammoth apparatus of education, propaganda and flag waving, as well as a national system of health, security and welfare. To realize how difficult it is to identify with such a nation, you just need to ask yourself, do I know these people? I can name my 2 sisters and 11 cousins and spend the whole day talking about their personalities, quirks, and relationships. I cannot name the 8 million people who share my Israeli citizenship. I have never met most of them, and I am very unlikely to ever meet them in the future. My ability to nevertheless feel loyal to this nebulous mass is a miracle of recent history. That does not mean there is anything wrong with with national bonds. Huge systems cannot function without mass loyalties, and expanding the circle of human empathy certainly has its merits. The milder forms of patriotism have been among the most benevolent of human creations, believing that my nation is unique, that it deserves my allegiance, and that I have special obligations towards its members inspires me to care about others and make sacrifice on their behalf. It is a dangerous mistake to imagine that without nationalism we would all be living in a liberal paradise. More likely, we would be living in tribal chaos. In particular, democracy cannot really function without nationalism. People are usually willing to accept the verdict of democratic elections only when all parties share the same national loyalty ties. Peaceful, prosperous and liberal countries such as Sweden, Germany, and Switzerland all enjoy a strong sense of nationalism. 暑い。 The list of countries lacking robust national bonds includes Afghanistan, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and most other failed states. The problem starts when benign patriotism morphs into chauvinistic ultranationalism. Instead of believing that my nation is unique, which is true of all nations, I might begin feeling that my nation is supreme, that I owe it my entire loyalty, and that I have no significant obligations to anyone else. This is fertile ground for violent conflicts. For generations, the most basic criticism of nationalism was that it led to war. Yet, as long as the nation provided most of its citizens with unprecedented levels of security and prosperity, they were willing to pay the price in blood. Until 1945, the nationalist deal still looked very attractive, though nationalism was leading to horrendous conflicts on an unprecedented scale. Modern nation states also built massive systems of healthcare, education, and welfare. National health services made passenger and burden seem worthwhile. Things changed in 1945. The invention of nuclear weapons sharply tightened the balance of the nationalist deal. After Hiroshima, people no longer feared the nationalism would lead to more war. They began fearing it would lead to nuclear war, total annihilation. Total annihilation has a way of sharpening people's minds, and thanks in no small measure to this shared existential threat. A global community gradually developed over and above the various nations, because only such a community could restrain the nuclear demo. In the 1964 U.S. presidential campaign, Lyndon B. Johnson aired the famous Daisy advertisement, one of the most successful pieces of propaganda in the annals of television. The advertisement opens with a little girl picking and counting the petals of a daisy, but when she reaches them, a metallic male voice takes over, counting back from 10 to 0 as in a missile countdown. Upon reaching 0, the bright flash of a nuclear explosion fills the screen, and candidate Johnson addresses the American public and says, "These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die." We tend to associate the make love, not war slogan with the late 1960s counterculture. あっちや、暑すぎる。But in fact, already in 1964, it was accepted with wisdom even among hard-nosed politicians such as Johnson. Consequently, during the Cold War, nationalism took a back seat to a more global approach to international politics. And when the Cold War ended, globalization seemed to be the irresistible wave of the future. It was expected that humankind would leave nationalistic politics completely behind, as a relic of more primitive times that might appeal at most to the ill-informed inhabitants of a few underdeveloped countries. Events in recent years on the citizens proved, however, that nationalism still has a powerful hold even on the citizens of Europe and the USA, not to mention Russia, India, and China, alienated by the impersonal forces of global education and welfare, global capitalism, and fearing for the fate of national systems of health, education, and welfare. People all over the world seek reassurance and meaning in the bosom of the nation. Yet the question raised by Johnson in the Daisy advertisement is even more pertinent today than it was in 1964. Will we make a world in which all humans can live together? Or will we all go into the dark? Do Donald Trump, Theresa May, Vladimir Putin, Narendra Modi, and their colleagues save the world funding our national sentiments? Or is the current nationalist sphere a form of escapism from the intractable global problems we face? 暑い。なんでそんなに体を反るねん。こんな体反り VTuber いねえぞ。体を反るな。The network of fortresses. World nationalism has many good ideas about how to a particular nation. Unfortunately, it has no viable plan for running the world as a whole. For example, Turkish nationalism can be a reasonable guide for managing the affairs of Turkey, but it has little to offer the rest of humanity, unless, of course, nationalism morphs into imperialism and calls for one nation to conquer and rule the entire world. A century ago, several nationalist movements indeed harbored such imperialist ambitions. Today's nationalists, whether in Turkey, Russia, Italy, or China, so far refrain from advocating global conquest. In place of violently establishing a global empire, some nationalists such as Steve Bannon, Viktor Orban, the Italian Lega and the British Brexiteers dream about a peaceful nationalist international. They argue that all nations today face the same enemies, the boogeyman of globalism. Multiculturalism and immigration are threatening to destroy the traditions and identities of all nations. Therefore, nationalists across the world should make common cause in opposing these global forces. Hungarians, Italians, Turks, and Israelis should build walls, erect fences, and slow down the movement of people, goods, money, and ideas. The world will then be divided into distinct nation states, each with its own sacred identity and traditions. Based on mutual respect for these differing identities, all nation states could cooperate and trade peacefully with one another. Hungary will be Hungarian, Turkey will be Turkish, Israel will be Israeli, and everyone will know who they are and what is their proper place in the world. It will be a world without immigration, without universal values, without multiculturalism, and without a global elite. But with peaceful international relations and some trade. In a word, the nationalist international envisions the world as a network of world-friendly fortresses. The key problem with this vision is that fortresses are seldom friendly. Each national fortress usually wants a bit more land, security, and prosperity for itself at the expense of the neighbors. And without the help of universal values and global organizations, rival fortresses cannot agree on common rules. All previous attempts to divide the world into clear-cut nations have resulted in war and genocide. But if you happen to live inside a particularly strong fortress, such as the US or Russia, why should you care? Some nationalists indeed adopt a more extreme isolationist position. They don't believe in either a global empire or a global network of fortresses. Instead, they deny the necessity of any global order whatsoever. Our fortress should just raise the drawbridges, they say, and the rest of the world can go to hell. We should refuse entry to foreign people, foreign ideas, and foreign goods. And as long as our walls are stout and the guards are loyal, who cares what happens to the foreigners? Such extreme isolationism, however, is completely divorced from economic realities. Without a global trade network, all existing national economies will collapse, including that of North Korea. Many countries will not be able to even feed themselves without imports, and prices of almost all products will skyrocket. The made in China shirt I am wearing cost me about $5. If it had been produced by Israeli workers from Israeli-grown cotton using Israeli-made machines powered by not existent Israel oil. It may well have cost 10 times as much. Nationalist leaders from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin may therefore help abuse on the global trade network, but no one thinks seriously of taking the country completely out of that network. And we cannot have a global trade network without some global order that sets the rules of the game. Even more importantly, whether people like it or not, humankind today faces three common challenges that make a mockery of all national borders, and that can only be solved through global cooperation. The nuclear challenge. Let's start with humankind's familiar nemesis, nuclear war. When Johnson's Daisy advertisement aimed in 1964, 2 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear annihilation was a palpable threat. Pundits and lay people alike feared that humankind did not have the wisdom to avert this destruction, and it was only a matter of time before the Cold War turned scorching hot. In fact, humankind successfully rose to the nuclear challenge. Americans, Soviets, Europeans, and Chinese changed the way geopolitics has been conducted for millennia, so that the Cold War ended with little bloodshed, and the new internationalist internationalist world order fostered an era of unprecedented peace. Not only was nuclear war averted, but war of all kinds declined. Since 1945, surprisingly few borders have been redrawn through net aggression, and most countries have ceased using war as a standard political tool. In 2016, despite wars in Syria, Ukraine, and several other hotspots, fewer people died from human violence than from obesity, from car accidents, or from suicide. This may well have been the greatest political and moral achievement of our times. Unfortunately, by now we are so used to this achievement that we take it for granted. This is partly why people allow themselves to play with fire. Russia and the USA have recently embarked on a new nuclear arms race, developing novel doomsday machines that threaten to undo the hard-won gains of the last decades and bring us back to the brink of nuclear annihilation. 暑い。全滅。Meanwhile, the public has learned to stop worrying about the bomb, as suggested in Dr. Strangelove. Or has just forgotten about its existence. Tuesday's Brexit debate in Britain, a major nuclear power, revolved mainly around questions of economics and immigration, while the vital contribution of the EU and European and global peace has largely been ignored. After centuries of terrible bloodshed, French, Germans, Italians, and Britons have finally built a mechanism that ensures continental harmony, only to have the British public throw a spanner into the miracle machine. It was extremely difficult to construct the internationalist regime that prevented nuclear war and safeguarded global peace. No doubt we need to adapt this regime to the changing conditions of the world. For example, by relying less on the USA and giving a greater role to non-Western powers such as China and India. But abandoning this regime altogether and reverting to nationalist power politics would be an irresponsible gamble. True, in the 19th century, countries played the nationalist game without destroying human civilization. But that was in the pre-Hiroshima era. Since then, nuclear weapons have raised the stakes and changed the fundamental nature of war and politics. As long as humans know how to enrich uranium and plutonium, their survival depends on privileging the prevention of nuclear war over the interests of any particular nation. Those nationalists who cry "our country first" should ask themselves whether their country by itself, without a robust system of international cooperation, can protect the world or even itself from nuclear destruction. The ecological challenge. On top of nuclear war, in the coming decades, humankind will face a new existential threat that hardly registered on the political radars in 1964. Ecological collapse. Humans are establishing the global biosphere on multiple fronts. We are taking more and more resources out of the environment, while pumping back in enormous quantities of waste and poison, thereby changing the composition of the soil, the waters, and the atmosphere. We are hardly even aware of the myriad ways in which we disrupt the delicate ecological balance that has been shaped over millions of years. Consider, for example, the use of phosphorus as a fertilizer. In small quantities, it is an essential nutrient for the growth of plants, but in excessive amounts, it becomes toxic. Modern industrial farming is based on artificially fertilizing the fields with plenty of phosphorus. But the high phosphorus runoff from the first subsequently poisons rivers, lakes, and oceans, with a devastating impact on marine life. A farmer growing corn in Iowa might choose inadvertently kill fish in the Gulf of Mexico. As a result of such activities, habitats are degraded. Animals and plants are becoming extinct, and entire ecosystems such as the Australian Great Barrier Reef and the Amazon rainforest might be destroyed. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens behaved as an ecological serial killer. Now it is morphing into an ecological mass murderer. If we continue with our present course, it will cause not just the annihilation of a large percentage of all life forms, but it might also sap the foundations of human civilization. Most setting of all is the protest of climate change. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years and have survived numerous ice ages and warm spells. However, agriculture, cities, and complex societies has existed for no more than 10,000 years. During this period, known as the Holocene, Earth's climate has been relatively stable. Any deviation from Holocene standards will present human societies with enormous challenges they never encountered before. It will be like conducting an open-ended experiment on billions of human guinea pigs. Even if human civilization eventually adapts to the new conditions, who knows how many victims might perish in the process of adaptation. 傾きすぎだよ。ちょっとトイレ行ってきます。あっち。だな。ただいま。暑い。暑い。扇風機の音が雑音として入ってすいませんね。でも暑いんだもん。千葉の図書館が使いたくて千葉市内で給食してるんですけども全然手応えなくてね、これも英語で食えるまでニートかなって、まあ勉強してるからニートではないんですけどね、ほんと10社くらい応募したのに全然手応えない。コールセンター系のテレアポ系の仕事に、まあ夏暑いんでもう警備員とか外は絶対なんで、工場とかもうそんな体力ないんで。なんかいい仕事ないかな。 正直金に対していらねえんだよ。年金あるから。千葉在勤の仕事だったら何でもいい。今メディカル系、介護系の千葉市の仕事にも応募したけど、俺は結構、大工は結構バックレをやってしまっているので、派遣会社できんかもしれない。スタッフサービスはどうだったかな。ネオキャリアはできんなんですけどね。あとリクルートも大手ができんなのは痛い。じゃあ再開します。The ecological challenge. On top of nuclear war, in the coming decades, humankind will face a new existential threat that hardly registered on the political radars in 読んだな。多分ここから The terrifying experiment has already been set in motion. Unlike nuclear war, which is a future potential, climate change is a present reality. There is a scientific consensus that human activities, in particular the emission of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, are causing the Earth's climate to change at a frightening rate. Nobody knows exactly how much carbon dioxide we can continue to pump into the atmosphere without triggering an irreversible cataclysm. But our best scientific estimates indicate that unless we dramatically cut the emission of greenhouse gases in the next 20 years, average global temperatures will increase by more than 2% Celsius, resulting in expanding deserts, disappearing ice caps, rising oceans, and more frequent extreme weather events such as hurricanes and typhoons. These changes in turn will disrupt agricultural production, inundate cities, make much of the world uninhabitable, and send hundreds of millions of refugees in search of new homes. Moreover, we are rapidly approaching a number of tipping points, beyond which even a dramatic drop in greenhouse gas emissions will not be enough to reverse the trend and avoid a worldwide tragedy. For example, as global warming melts the polar ice sheets, less sunlight is reflected back from planet Earth to outer space. This means that the planet absorbs more heat, temperatures rise even higher, and the ice melts even faster. Once this feedback loop crosses a critical threshold, it will gather an irresistible momentum, and all the ice in the polar regions will melt even if humans stop burning coal, oil, and gas. Hence, it is not enough that we recognize the danger we face. It is critical that we actually do something about it new. Unfortunately, as of 2018, instead of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the global emission rate is still increasing. Humanity has very little time left to wean itself from fossil fuels. We need to enter rehab today, not next year or next month, but today. Hello, I am Homo sapiens, and I am a fossil fuel addict. Where does nationalism fit into this alarming picture? Is there a nationalist answer to the ecological menace? Can any nation, however powerful, stop global warming by itself? Individual countries can certainly adopt a variety of green policies, many of which make good economic as well as environmental sense. Governments can tax carbon emissions at the cost of externalities to the price of oil and gas, adopt stronger environmental regulations, cut subsidies to polluting industries, and incentivize the switch to renewable energy. They can also invest more money in researching and developing revolutionary eco-friendly technologies. In a kind of ecological Manhattan Project, the internal combustion engine is to be thanked for many of the advertisements of the last 150 years. But if we are to keep a stable physical and economical environment, it must now be retired and substituted by new technologies that do not burn fossil fuels. Technological breakthroughs can be help useful in many other fields besides energy. Consider, for example, the potential of developing clean meat. At present, the meat industry not only inflicts untold misery on billions of sentient beings, but it is also one of the chief causes of global warming, one of the main consumers of antibiotics and poison, and one of the foremost polluters of air, land and water, according to land and water. According to a 2013 report by the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, it takes about 15,000 liters of fresh water to produce 1 kilogram of beef. Compared to 287 liters needed to produce a kilogram of potatoes. この辺ハラリのビーガン意識が出てますね。ちょくちょく顔出すんですよね、ビーガン。まあ俺も大工も別にビーガンに積極的に反対してるわけじゃないんですけど、それでもね、うちの猫は肉を食うので人間だけは肉を食わないのは偽善かなって思ってるんで。あとね、牛がメタンガス出すからって地球の悪者扱いするのが気に食わねえ。人類がどれだけ牛に世話になってると思ってんだ。今更悪者扱いするなよ。The pressure on the environment is likely to get worse as rising prosperity in countries such as China and Brazil allows hundreds of millions of additional people to switch from eating potatoes to eating beef on a regular basis. It would be difficult to convince the Chinese and the Brazilians, not to mention the Americans and the Germans, to stop eating steaks, hamburgers, and sausages. But what if engineers could find a way to grow meat from cells? If you want a hamburger, just grow a hamburger instead of raising and slaughtering an entire cow and transporting the carcass thousands of kilometers. That might sound like science fiction, but the world's first clean hamburger was grown from cells and then eaten in 2013. It cost $330,000. 4 years of research and development brought the price down to $11 per unit. And within another decade, industrially produced clean meat is expected to be cheaper than slaughtered meat. This technological development could save billions of animals from a life of abject misery, could help feed billions of malnourished humans, and could simultaneously help to prevent ecological meltdown. シムルタネート。 Hence, there are many things that governments, corporations, and individuals can do to avoid climate change, but to be effective, they must be done on a global level. When it comes to climate, countries are just not sovereign. They are at the mercy of actions taken by people on the other side of the planet. The Republic of Kiribati, an island nation in the Pacific Ocean, could reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to zero and nevertheless be submerged under the rising waves if other countries don't follow it. Follows it. Chad could put a solar panel on every roof in the country and yet become a barren desert due to the irresponsible environmental policies of distant foreigners. Even powerful nations such as China and Japan are not ecologically sovereign. To protect Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Tokyo from destructive floods and typhoons, the Chinese and Japanese will have to convince the Russian and American governments to abandon the business as usual approach. Nationalist isolationism is probably even more dangerous in the context of climate change than of nuclear war. An all-out nuclear war threatens to destroy all nations, so as nations have an equal stake in preventing it. Global warming, in contrast, will probably have a different impact on different nations. Some countries, most notably Russia, might actually benefit from it. Russia has relatively few coastline assets, hence it is far less worried than China or Kiribati about rising sea levels. And whereas は品質単語だな。そして毎回忘れるんだよな。ところがAnd whereas higher temperatures are likely to turn Chad into a desert, they must simultaneously turn Siberia into the breadbasket of the world. Moreover, as the ice melts in the far north, the Russian-dominated Arctic Sea lanes might become the artery of global commerce, and Kamchatka might replace Singapore as the crossroads of the world. Similarly, replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy sources is likely to appeal to some countries more than to others. China, Japan, and South Korea depend on importing huge quantities of oil and gas. They will be delighted to be free of that burden. Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia depend on exporting oil and gas. Their economies will collapse collapse if oil and gas suddenly give way to solar and wind. なんでそんなに首を傾けてるんだ、アバターよ。上を向け。いや、上を向きすぎても分からない。傾くな。リップシンク全然してねえよな。あ、リップシンクしてるか、お前。リップシンク。この距離じゃないとリップシンクしてないのか。てか、画質悪。このアバター画質悪。Consequently, while some nations such as China, Japan, and Kiribati are likely to push hard for reducing global carbon emissions as soon as possible, other nations such as Russia and Iran might be far less enthusiastic, even in countries that stand to lose much from global warming, such as the USA. Nationalists might be too short-sighted and self-absorbed to appreciate the danger. A small but telling example was given in January 2018, when the United States imposed a 30% tariff on foreign-made solar panels and solar equipment, preferring to support American solar producers even at the cost of slowing the switch to renewable energy. もう1時間やってんだ。An atom bomb is such an obvious and immediate threat that nobody can ignore it. Global warming, in contrast, is a more vague and protracted menace. Hence, whatever long-term environmental considerations demand some painful short-term sacrifice. Nationalists might be tempted to put immediate national interests first and reassure themselves that they can worry about the environment later, or just leave it to people elsewhere. Alternatively, they may simply deny the problem. It isn't a coincidence that skepticism about climate change tends to be the preserve of the nationalist right. You rarely see left-wing socialists tweet that climate change is a Chinese hoax, since there is no national answer to the problem of global warming. Some nationalist politicians prefer to believe the problem does not exist. <sighs> 放送事故だ。喋んないと。黄色トップバリューのスポーツドリンクがぬるい。あと7ページくらいで終わるんで、このチャプター8が。そうしたら、もう英会話予約入れたんだよな。飯食いてえな。The technological challenge. The same dynamics are likely to spoil any nationalist antidote to the third existential threat of the 21st century, technological disruption. As we saw In earlier chapters, the measure of infotech and biotech opens the door to a cornucopia of doomsday scenarios, ranging from digital dictatorships to the creation of a global useless class. What is the nationalist answer to these menaces? There is no nationalist answer, as in the case of climate change. So also with technological disruption, the nation state is simply the wrong framework to address the threat. Since research and development are not the monopoly of any one country, even a superpower like the USA cannot restrict them by itself. If the US government forbids genetically engineering human embryos, it doesn't prevent Chinese scientists from doing so, and if the resulting developments confer on China some crucial economic or military advantage, the USA will be tempted to break its own ban, particularly in a xenophobic dog world. If even a single country chooses to pursue a high risk, high gain technological path, other countries will be forced to do the same, because nobody can afford to remain behind. In order to avoid such a race to the bottom, humankind will probably need some kind of global identity and loyalty. Moreover, whereasまた出てきたウェリアズ、そしてまた忘れたウェリアズ。ところがMoreover, whereas nuclear war and climate change threaten only the physical survival of humankind, disruptive technologies might change the very nature of humanity, and are therefore entangled with humans' deepest ethical and religious beliefs. While everyone agrees that we should avoid nuclear war and ecological meltdown, people have widely different opinions about using bioengineering and AI to upgrade humans and to create new life forms. If humankind fails to devise and administer globally accepted ethical guidelines, it will be open season for Dr. Frankenstein. When it comes to formulating such ethical guidelines, nationalism suffers above all from a failure of the imagination. Nationalists think in terms of territorial conflicts lasting centuries, while the technological revolutions of the 21st century should really be understood in cosmic terms. After 4 billion years of organic life evolving by natural selection, science and ushering in the era of inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. when it comes to in the process, Homo sapiens itself will likely disappear. Today, we are still apes of the hominid family. We still share with Neanderthals and chimpanzees most of our bodily structures, physical abilities, and mental faculties. Not only are our hands, eyes, and brains distinctly hominid, but so are our lust, our love, anger, and social bonds. Within a century or two, the combination of biotechnology and AI might result in bodily, physical, and mental traits that completely break free of the hominid mode. Some believe that consciousness might even be severed from any organic structure and could cyberspace free of all biological and physical constraints. On the other hand, we might witness the complete decoupling of intelligence from consciousness, and the development of AI might result in a world dominated by super intelligent but completely non-conscious entities. What has Israeli, Russian, or French nationalism got to say about this? Not much. Nationalism does not think on a level. Choose Israeli nationalism is very concerned about the question: Will Jerusalem be ruled by Israelis or Palestinians a century from now? While not caring at all about the question, will us be ruled by sapiens or cyborgs a century from now? In order to make wise choices about the future of life, we need to go way beyond the nationalist viewpoint and look at things from a global or even a cosmic perspective. Like the ancient tribes along the Nile River, all nations today live along a single global river of information, scientific discoveries, and technological inventions, which is the basis of our prosperity and also a threat to our existence. To regulate this global river, all nations should make common cause. はあ、あと1、2、3、4、5ページ。でもびっしりだ。この本何ページなんだ？本編で374ページ。3分の1以上上がったんだ。Specific hours. Each of these three problems. Each of these problems, nuclear war, ecological collapse, and technological disruption, is enough to threaten the future of human civilization. But taken together, they add up to an unprecedented existential crisis, especially because they are likely to reinforce and compound one another. For example, although the ecological crisis threatens the survival of human civilization as we have known it, it is unlikely to stop the development of AI and bioengineering. If we are counting on rising oceans, dwindling food supplies, and mass migrations to divert our attention from algorithms and genes. Think again. As the technological crisis deepens, the development of high-risk, high-gain technologies will probably only accelerate. Indeed, climate change may well come to perform the same function as the two world wars between 1914 and 1918, and again between 1939 and 1945. The pace of technological development skyrocketed because nations engaged in total war threw caution and economy to the wind and invested immense resources in all kinds of audacious and fantastic projects. Many of these projects failed, but some produced tanks, radar, poison gas, supersonic jet, intercontinental missiles, and nuclear bombs. Similarly, nations facing a climate cataclysm might be tempted to invest their hopes in despite technological gambles. Humankind has a lot of justifiable concerns about AI and bioengineering, but in times of crisis, people do risky things. Whatever we think about regulating disruptive technologies, ask yourself whether these regulations are likely to hold even if climate change causes global food shortages, floods, cities all over the world, and send hundreds of millions of refugees across borders. In turn, technological disruptions might increase the danger of apocalyptic wars, not just by increasing global tensions, but also by establishing the nuclear balance of power. Since the 1950s, superpowers avoided conflicts with one another because they all knew that war meant mutually assured destruction. But as new kinds of offensive and defensive weapons appear, a rising technological superpower might conclude that it can destroy its enemies with impunity. Conversely, a declining power might fear that its traditional nuclear weapons might soon become obsolete, and that if had better used them before it lost them. Traditionally, nuclear confrontations resembled a hyper-rational chess game. What would happen when players could use cyber attacks to wrest control over rivals' pieces? When anonymous third parties could move a pawn without anyone knowing who is making the move, or when AlphaZero graduates from ordinary chess to nuclear chess, just as the different challenges are likely to compound one another, so also the goodwill necessary to confront one challenge may be sapped away by problems on another front. Countries locked in armed competition are unlikely to agree on restricting the development of AI, and countries striving to achieve the technological achievements of their rivals will find it very difficult to agree on a common plan to stop climate change. As long as the world remains divided into rival nations, it will be very hard to simultaneously ジェシカ乗っちゃダメ、お布団乗っちゃダメ、おしっこするから降りなさい。どこなんだっけ。 It will be very hard to simultaneously overcome all three challenges, and the future on even a single front might prove catastrophic. To conclude, the nationalist wave sweeping over the world cannot turn the clock back to 1933, 1939, or 1914. Technology has changed everything by creating a set of global existential threats that no nation can solve on its own. A common enemy is the best catalyst for forging a common identity, and humankind now has at least 3 such enemies: nuclear war, climate change, and technological disruption. If despite 3 common threats humans choose to privilege their particular national loyalties above everything else, the results may be far worse than in 1914 and 1939. A much better path is the one outlined in the European Union's draft constitution, which says that while remaining proud of their own national identities and history, the peoples of Europe are determined to transcend their former divisions and united ever more closely forge a common destiny. That does not mean abolishing all nations' identities, abandoning all local traditions, and turning humanity into homogeneous grey goo. Nor does it mean vilifying all expressions of patriotism. Indeed, by providing a continental military and economic protective shell, the European Union arguably fostered local patriotism in places such as Flanders, Lombardy, Catalonia, and Scotland. The idea of establishing an independent Scotland or Catalonia looks more attractive when you don't have to fear a German invasion, and when you can count on a common European front against global warming and global corporations. European nationalists are therefore taking it easy. For all the take of the return of the nation, few Europeans are actually willing to kill and be killed for it. 喉が音読は喉に応える。European nationalists are therefore taking it easy. For all the talk of the return of the nation, few Europeans are actually willing to kill and be killed for it. When the Scots sought to break away from London's grip in the days of William Wallace and Robert Bruce, they had to raise an army to do so. In contrast, not a single person was killed during the 2014 Scottish referendum. And if next time Scots vote for independence, it is highly unlikely that they will have to restage the Battle of Bannockburn. The Catalan attempt to break away from Spain has resulted in considerably more violence, but it too falls far short of the carnage Barcelona experienced in 1939 or in 1714. The rest of the world can hopefully learn from the European example. Even on a united planet, there will be plenty of room for the kind of patriotism that celebrates the uniqueness of my nation and stress my special obligations towards it. Yet, if we want to survive and flourish, humankind has little choice but to complement such local loyalties with substantial obligations towards a global community. A person can and should be loyal simultaneously to her family, her neighborhood, her profession, and her nation. Why not add humankind and planet Earth to that list? True. When you have multiple loyalties, conflicts are sometimes inevitable. But then who said life was simple? Deal with it. In previous eras, national identities were forged because humans faced problems and opportunities that were far beyond the scope of local tribes, and that only countrywide cooperation could hope to handle. In the 21st century, nations find themselves in the same situation as...おい、ジェシカダメ！ジェシカ布団に乗っちゃダメ！お前おしっこするから乗っちゃダメ！Humankind has little choice but to complement such local loyalty with substantial obligations towards a global community. A person can and should be loyal. In previous eras, nation identities were forced because humans faced problems and opportunities that were far beyond the scope of local tribes, and that only countrywide cooperation could hope to handle. In the 21st century, nations find themselves in the same situation as the old tribes. They are no longer the right framework to manage the most important challenges of the age. We need a new global identity because national institutions are incapable of handling a set of unprecedented も進出だな。アンプレシデンティ前例のないジェシカのお茶だめ降りなさい部屋から追い出すぞジェシカを座っちゃダメジェシカおしっこするから布団に乗っちゃダメどこまで読んだっけThis mismatch prevents the political system from effectively countering our main problems. To have effective politics, we must either deglobalize the economy and the march of science, or we must globalize our politics. Since it is impossible to deglobalize the economy and the march of science, and since the cost of deglobalizing the economy would probably be prohibitive, the only real solution is to globalize politics. There is no contradiction between such globalism and patriotism. For patriotism isn't about hating foreigners. Patriotism is about taking care of your compatriots. And in the 21st century, in order to protect the safety and security of your compatriots, you must cooperate with foreigners. So good nationalists should not be globalists. This isn't a call for establishing a global government, a doubtful and unrealistic vision. Rather, to globalize politics implies that political dynamics within countries and even cities should give far more weight to global problems and interests. When the next elections come along and politicians are imploring you to vote for them, ask these politicians for questions. If you are elected, what actions will you take to lessen the risks of nuclear war? What actions will you take to lessen the risks of climate change? What actions will you take to regulate disruptive technologies such as AI and bioengineering? And finally, how do you how, how do you see the world of 2040? What is your worst case scenario, and what is your vision for the best case scenario? If some politicians don't understand these questions, or if they constantly talk about the past without being able to formulate a meaningful vision for the future, don't vote for them. Unfortunately, too many politicians have a very narrow view of the national interest and rail against global cooperation. Perhaps, then, we can rely on the universal religions traditions of humankind to help us unite the world. Hundreds of years ago, religions such as Christianity and Islam already thought in global rather than local terms, and they were always keenly interested in the big questions of life rather than just in the political struggles of this or that nation. But are traditional religions still relevant? Do they retain the power to shape the world, or are they just inert relics from our past, tossed here and there by the mighty forces of modern states, economies and technologies? はい、チャプター7が終わりました。長かった。はい、一旦ここまで。1時間38分結構やったな。じゃあ、お疲れ様でした。